All right, we are right on the dot here. Let us get started. Welcome to our session. Super excited to have everyone here. My name is April Rassa. I lead our product marketing organization here at Celigo. And before we get started, let me just cover just a few housekeeping items to make sure everyone's squared away. We want to hear from you. This is going to be a great discussion. I'm super thrilled to have the speakers on. So we're going to have it lively and want to hear from you. So use the Q&A button so we can answer your questions. We'll get to them at the end. And this session is being recorded, so we'll make sure to provide the slides and the recording to all of the folks that have attended. So let us get started with introductions. I'll do the intros. You already heard about me. Let's start with our guest. We've got Isidro Spencer, who is a solutions architecture lead at BringIT, one of our key integration partners that help companies actually operationalize their tech stack, not just implement it. So he's got 3 decades of experience helping and guiding organizations around their enterprise systems, making sure that they work and helping teams really sort of anchor and understand how to deploy AI, moving from pilot to production. And a fun fact, he has spoken at the UN General Assembly last year on AI's impact on humanity and global regulation. Super, super cool. So great to have you here, Isidro. Ronen Vengosh, he is our Chief Strategy Officer at Celigo. I have really enjoyed working with Ronen. He's working not only on helping us at Celigo operationalize and transform our own operations using AI, but he's spent a ton of time talking to customers to help them drive change and deploy AI effectively. It's been awesome working with Ronen. He spent 10 years before he joined Celigo at Ignite, building and scaling their vertical solutions, and he grew a key business vertical 4x in 4 years. So Ronen, thanks for being here. All right, so let's dive in. It's not lost on anyone on this call that AI agents and AI is ushering just a new era of automation. I think we can all safely say that, but it doesn't come without operational gaps. Not the technology itself, but kind of derailing over 40% of them. And not to start on a sour note, but really some of those are just reliant on data and system silos that are stalling progress. And in fact, Gartner, as you can see here on the slide here, 40% of agentic AI projects, and reminder, agentic, the way Gartner defines is really AI systems that can autonomously plan and execute multi-step systems and tasks with sort of minimal human interaction. So 40% of those will be canceled by 2027 due to cost, due to governance issues or inaccuracy. So we're seeing that as well. In fact, if I can just remind maybe some folks that attended our last webinar, we actually had a survey and we asked, how do you describe your current state of AI in your organization? And look at that. We've got, a lot of folks that are kind of in the mid stage, kind of actively tinkering and implementing AI in multiple areas. But kind of experimenting in isolated use cases, right? As you can see, almost 61% of them are doing that. So very, very interesting in terms of just sort of the state of nature of where we are today. Okay, so let's move to just a quick tease as far as a discussion here. This group is going to get some exclusive data on some of the results that we're going to be publishing in the month to come. We surveyed about 500 executives on key areas that they're looking around AI and how to scale that. And we're going to sprinkle some of that data here in our conversation with both Isidro as well as Ronen and kind of get their unique perspectives because they're in the trenches. They're talking to a lot of our folks in the market. So let's dive in. Okay, first question. So we are seeing AI just amplify across different, areas, work streams, across different workflows. You can see here 80% of the executives using enterprise-wide integration platforms have well-defined automated processes for their AI. So AI success increases as processes become more automated and more defined. And I think Ronen, the data shows a pretty clear pattern here. AI, success drops off fast when processes aren't really automated. From what you're seeing with customers who are actually getting AI into production, what's the typical state of their workflows when they think about, adding AI?
Yeah, and first of all, April, great to be here. Very excited to talk about this subject, which I spend a lot of time on. So, look, it's no secret. I think many have said it before that an AI strategy is really a data strategy, and the success of AI is highly dependent on having very clear definitions and processes for what you want to accomplish. I'll give a specific example here that comes to mind. I was working with one of our customers on a pretty simple agent that they were going to use to automate the approval of expense reports within that organization. Mm-hmm. And when we started getting into the specifics of how this is done, what stopped us wasn't the technology. It was the realization that the organization didn't have a very clear and precise SOP for how these things get approved, right? There was a lot of tribal knowledge. There was a lot of exceptions. Even when the policy was written, it was not kind of always followed in practice exactly the same way as it was written. And I think that's a great example. Even for a very simple use case like that, being able to document what it is that you're trying to do and having clear processes in place makes automation and makes AI much more effective and greatly reduces the chance of the project failing.
Totally. Yeah. No, I think that makes a ton of sense. And in fact, if you look at the right side of the screen here in terms of percent of AI success by process maturity, you can kind of see sort of where that, is fitting across automated, across sort of like, largely defined. I guess maybe segueing to you, Isidro, you work with companies at different stages of maturity, as you think about that. And when a client comes to you wanting to deploy AI, but their workflows are maybe manual or kind of loosely defined, what does that conversation kind of look like? How do you help them figure out whether to fix the foundation first or what's the path forward to AI?
Well, first of all, thank you, April. I'm glad to be here and excited for this conversation. And coming to the topic, if I'm being honest, when a customer comes with very manual or loosely defined processes, and they tell me, I want to deploy AI, my first reaction isn't technical. It's like diagnosis. Because I try to reframe with them what's the objective of the business on using artificial intelligence. Like, what do you want to improve? Where's the time being lost? What's the data, or where does the data break down? Because one of the things that we need to take into consideration is that AI amplifies whatever foundation it is on. So whether it's good or bad. And sometimes I go with our customers and tell them, we need to position this very strategically. I explain it like AI is a multiplier. Clean process times AI, that's equal acceleration, but broken processes times AI, that's equal to faster chaos. As an example, with one of our customers, he was telling me, hey, I'm using this LLM and I'm asking it to do a journal entry, but it's giving me a story. And I was like, yeah, because you don't have the right context on it. It doesn't know what to do. It's not creating a transaction because you are not telling it to actually perform that transaction. So those are kind of the key questions that I ask them whenever a company says we want to go with AI.
Mm-hmm. That's actually
can I jump in on this real quick?
Yeah,
April,
for sure.
So I think you're hearing from both Isidro and I that there's kind of a great emphasis on defining the process, on having clean data and so forth. I just want to emphasize that if you're going to wait until your data is perfect before you move forward with AI, man, you're going to be waiting for a long time. I don't know any company out there that says that their data is perfect, and that's not the point, right? It's about the things that you're looking to automate, the things that you're looking to build AI on. That needs to have like a strong foundation. You need to know exactly what you're trying to do, and then you need to make sure that the data actually supports that, right? But it's not about waiting forever to have all your data silos correctly structured and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I think that's a good reminder for the folks on the call and for all of us. I mean, I think it's also a good segue into the next area where we wanted to talk about, which is the data piece, the context piece that you guys both alluded to. So at the end of the day, 90% of those that were surveyed talked about successful AI implementations use more than one data source, right? The ability to kind of cobble and connect these systems together to then give you, so in fact, 93% say successful AI projects actually include more than 3 data sources to then give you that context and visibility as far as where you need to maybe optimize that. So interesting anecdote. So with that, 90% of successful AI needs multiple data sources. Isidro, maybe I'll segue to you. You're brought in to companies where they realize that their data situation is kind of messier than they thought. And you chuckle at this, I know. When a team comes to you saying, we want to deploy AI across the business, what's your process for kind of helping them map out what data they actually need, where it lives, whether their current integration setup is actually set up to handle that? Maybe just kind of walk the team through as far as how they should be thinking about that.
Sure, of course. And I'm gonna throw a fact in here. As you were saying, most companies do not want information only from one source, one data source. I mean, nowadays, companies want information from their ERP system, from their MES system, quality systems. So now we get into the realm of having several systems that need to be fitting AI so that we can have a very high level and sometimes even detailed view of all of your operation. So the exercise that I do with other companies is basically we start with the decisions and not specifically the data. As Ronen was saying, if we are going to wait on data, it's going to take us forever. We're never going to implement AI, right? It's never going to be 100% accurate, or it's not going to be 100% clean. But at least when we set the foundation and we try to take the decisions based on what do we want to improve with AI. For example, do we want to do a forecast for cash flow? Then we start working on how does AR, AP, billing schedules look like so that we can actually build that forecast. Also, for example, some other teams, they step out and basically they assume that once you have more data, that is equal to better AI. Not necessarily. If you have a strong foundation, even if you have a few buckets of data on your systems, you're going to be able to pull up some reporting onto that. But we need to know where does the data actually lives, whether if it's the ERP or if it's belonging to a CRM, so we can give the right context to your LLM and therefore give you the right insights on your reporting or even to automate your tasks on the company.
Yeah, no, I think, and Ronen, we see this, right? We see this where companies have multiple data sources, but surprise, they're actually not talking to each other. And what does that look like in practice, to your point around getting AI layered on top of that mess? And what's the actual business impact when these tools can't see beyond their own silos? How do you sort of direct companies to kind of think about that, to Isidro's point?
Yeah, and this kind of brings a bigger point here, which has to do with the way the ecosystem is kind of evolving, right? So these days, every SaaS vendor out there is introducing AI capabilities into their product. And you can't blame them. They have to do this, or they can't be left behind. But the result of that is that you have a series of what I call these walled gardens. And you have kind of, an AI tool that lives inside the CRM, and another one separately that lives inside the ERP. And if you're asking, for one to perform a task, it will do so, but within its own kind of defined silo. And that obviously is a problem because business operations don't span, like they span across these walled gardens of kind of SaaS vendors created. And that's, of course, an issue. And when you talk to customers and in this area, you find that many of them have literally dozens of different AI tools that are spread out across all these different applications. And that really misses the point of the value of what AI can do for you. Like the only way to really get the value and measure ROI on this is to connect AI across an entire workflow and an entire process. And the core of that is actually kind of connecting all these different silos and different applications. So there's multiple ways you can go about doing that. One way is to try and build kind of direct connections between these applications and integration, if you will. That requires a lot of work and maintenance. It might be a little cheaper these days because you can use AI to do some of that work, but it's still pretty fragile as a strategy and pretty cumbersome. Another that I hear frequently is folks are saying, "Oh, we're just going to move everything into a data warehouse," which is a great idea to the extent that you're able to do that, but it's not always functional. It's not always practical. Many companies have literally hundreds of applications in their software stack, but they're only centralizing data, from 4, 5, 8 of these. And even when they do that, the rate at which they're refreshing the data, might be a few times a day, right? So it's not real-time data, and that obviously creates its own issues. And so what are the other options? Another option is to use an automation platform, an iPaaS, that kind of connects all these different systems and kind of pulls the data together and bridges the silos. And of course, no surprise, we have an opinion about that, but we think it's kind of the way to go, and it's been proven very effective in a lot of these settings.
Nice. Yep. Sounds good. Well, we want to hear from you. So I think let's do a poll. So we shared sort of the learnings that we got, in terms of the research that we did, but let's kind of maybe just do a poll and kind of get a better sense as far as how many separate systems does your AI need to pull data from to be useful? I'm curious from the audience perspective, sort of what you're seeing, in terms of your landscape. What does that look like? Maybe give it a few seconds here so we can kind of see the results trickling in. And look at this. Let's see. So we've got between 3 to 5. 65%, 3 to 5, 6 to 10 is about 26%. Okay, interesting. Any surprises here, Ronen or Isidro? Is this kind of baseline for what you guys are seeing when you're talking to customers? We start with Ronen first.
Yeah, no, I'm not surprised at all. This is what we see not only with customers, but with our own internal operations as we're kind of embedding AI. Again, the value really is in bridging those silos. It's kind of using the data from multiple sources to collect kind of a comprehensive picture about what you're trying to accomplish, right? So another kind of interesting question that we haven't asked here, but that I can give kind of my perspective on, is how many AI tools companies have. And when I ask that question, typically I get an answer that's kind of over a dozen, right? So because it's everywhere, like AI tools are in every single application, but they don't overcome kind of this silo problem that we're calling out here.
Yeah. Isidro, anything you wanted to add there, or we're good?
Even my washing machine has AI now. No, but for reals, I mean, because of this, right? It's a hype. Everyone wants to use AI, and it's not surprising that people is actually choosing 3 to 5 or even more. Yep.
Yep. Okay. Sounds good. Makes sense. Thank you for joining in, audience, for doing our poll here. Let's maybe shift gears a little bit and talk about this shared ownership as we start to think about AI, sort of operationalizing and requiring both both AI, both IT and business collaboration, and how do we think about that? So as you can see here, we've got an interesting stat around AI powered, and let's maybe talk a little bit about the AI innovation requires both IT and business. So, IT typically, right, they define the standards, the governance, the control. You've got the business that really wants that empowerment to kind of, drive the workflows, drive the connectivity between their systems and processes to make things more efficient. And they don't necessarily want to be reliant on the heavy workload that IT requires in terms of, back systems and working within that framework. So I think that's sort of the beauty of where, kind of democratizing AI and making that available for the business to be able to kind of drive that across their different applications. Isidro, maybe just where have you seen AI initiatives maybe kind of stall when we talk about ownership, right? When we talk about ownership wasn't clear, and when IT and business finally, have this shared model, what do you think kind of changes? So I'm curious in terms of the dichotomy between the business and IT. You could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, for sure. So I've seen the following pattern. It's very typical. IT owns the data pipelines, business owns the processes, but no one takes the decision on what does the AI is supposed to improve. And therefore, IT delivers a model, operations questions the output, and no one uses it. Right. Mm-hmm. So that's a typical pattern that I've seen where AI initiatives kind of stall. Now with the fine line between information technologies and operation technologies, what I've seen with our companies that are being successful by implementing AI is that they come together as a group and they set the foundations for how does AI needs to work for their company. IT controls, right? Because you don't want any employee to kind of set a data breach just by putting information on the internet or into a model that is not very secure, or it doesn't have the proper security controls. But therefore, when you have that type of control and you leave all of the operational perspective to the business, that's when AI starts to work properly for the companies.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. I think when it comes to sort of operationalizing that, Ronen, I'm going to turn maybe over to you. I think that makes a ton of sense. If a business team comes to IT today with maybe a promise of an AI idea, what should that handoff ideally kind of look like in the first 30 to 60 days?
Yeah. So look, I'm going to say a couple of things to this, and I see a very wide range of kind of practices in the market around this. I'll just maybe tell a little anecdote here. I was speaking at a conference in Boston last summer, and the session right before me was the CIO of this major corporation that stood up there and talked about how they've adopted AI across the board, and they've got their teams kind of all implementing agents, and every employee had access to an agent building studio, and all this stuff was going out. And afterwards, when he was done speaking, I went up to him and I said, "Listen, this was fantastic. You're well ahead of the curve in terms of where you are operationally, but how do you handle governance? Like, what is the process for making sure that what's happening is in fact acceptable from a company's perspective on security, on privacy, on a range of other things?" And this gentleman looked me straight in the eye and said, "You know what? We haven't figured that out yet." Right. So that's really not a place that you want to be as an organization, right? I think there is this model of shared ownership. The business is closest to the needs. They understand what they're trying to accomplish. And over time, progressively so, it's going to become easier and easier for them to actually build those capabilities within their own teams, because the level of sophistication needed to do this is going down and will continue to go down. But IT's role here is in making sure that the organization as a whole is protected, that there's governance in place, that there's operational guidelines in place that are set to support that. And it's very common for the business folks to not think about that first. They have a business problem that they're trying to solve, and they might not be thinking as far as kind of what the other implications are. And so there's really, as Isidro pointed out, there needs to be a really close partnership between both teams in getting this right. Otherwise, it's really a recipe for bad things to happen.
Yeah, makes a ton of sense. Moving into our final sort of area as we start to think about companies using integration platforms are seeing higher AI workflow autonomy. The TLDR on the MIT report, not visibly on this screen, but the 90% of successful AI deployments share one thing in common, and they use an integration platform. I think that just spotlights a lot of, amplifies the rest of the data here in terms of executives using iPaaS, not only for autonomous, but also how they think about it in the next 12 to 18 months. And with that, I'm curious, from your perspective, Isidro, maybe I'll turn it over to you. What are you seeing as far as the big aha moments? As you think about, you're responsible for evaluating a lot of platforms, right? When it comes to your customers, what are the non-negotiables you look for when you're making a recommendation across an integration platform?
Yeah, definitely. And I want to make a little parenthesis here. It's very interesting that most of our customers that have approached us in order to enable them with AI, their requests come from financial people, not even from IT, which is kind of interesting. I mean, because you will like to say that IT will drive the conversations, will drive the projects. It's not happening. It's happening the other way around. It's more the operations or the financial teams, which is great. In here, for example, one of the things that I always tell our customers and even non-customers, what are the things that we look for is security and governance, for sure. That's one of the top priorities. You would like to have connectivity because, again, and as we were looking at the poll results, you will connect more than 3 to 5 or even more systems. So you will like your AI strategy to work for all of it, for all of the information, so that you can have a clear picture of all of your business. So I'll say connectivity, that's the second one. One or non-negotiable for me is whether the platform is future ready or not. And the reason is because you would like to have tools that will grow with your business, that will scale. If we don't see this kind of projects, especially AI, as something holistic, then, I mean, it's not going to work at all. You need to have a platform that is going to be growing with your business. Otherwise, you're not going to have a good strategy on artificial intelligence, and it's not going to help. That goes back to where some of the projects get stalled. It's because they don't have a clear indication. They don't have the clear tools that can help them to enable all things AI for the future.
Got it. Yeah, no, I think just for folks on this call, I think, look, a lot of organizations are, there's a mandate to become an AI company and to sort of accelerate, through that. And I'd love to maybe just open it up to both of you as we start to think about, we're building this for AI. What are some of the guardrails or things that, folks on this call should be thinking about to activate, AI across their organization? What are some learnings that you've heard from customers that you think, would be helpful, or best practices that we can share and pass on to this team here? And Ronen, maybe I'll ask you, because it's top of mind. I know you talk to a lot of our customers and give them a lot of guidance in terms of, hey, we got to become an AI company. What does that kind of look like in the next, quarter to 6 months to a year? Any advice or best practices for the group here?
Yeah, so I'll say two things. One is maybe self-explanatory here, but first of all, think about connecting everything, right? So it's not just business applications; it's all the data sources. It's about managing APIs. It's about managing EDI. It's about moving large amounts of data, ETL capabilities. Like, this is all one problem, right? So that's kind of one thing. The second thing I want to say is that not everything needs to be AI. And this is kind of an interesting thing to say on an AI kind of webinar, but very often I talk to customers who are really looking for automation, but are using the language of AI. And AI is not appropriate for everything. And that's kind of really important to understand. I call this the principle of least agency, where you don't need to have kind of AI that's fully agentic. Don't do it. Like, AI is a great technology, but it does have issues with cost, with latency, with hallucinations, right? And so wherever you can use kind of deterministic processes to automate things, that's probably a better choice. It's going to be less expensive, it's going to be more accurate, and it's going to be faster. So think about this whole issue of AI and automation is one unit of connecting everything to everything in the best possible strategy, right? So AI where it's needed, automation where it's needed, and kind of bring these all together, I think is the key here. So.
Love that. Isidro, anything to add?
Yeah, I've seen this, and Ronen's comment brought me back to one of our conversations that I was having with a customer. They wanted to do something with AI. They wanted to connect an LLM for something that was going to be easier just to do traditional automation. I was like, well, if we put a workflow like if then else, that's it. You're going to get the same result. So as Ronen was saying, exactly. and so I think that people need to understand what's the difference, right, between traditional automation and AI. What are the capabilities of any of those? What are the outputs that you're gonna receive? And also on the long run, I mean, you will like that some of the areas where AI is going to be implemented are operationally repetitive, pattern-based, for example. At the beginning, maybe you are going to start with low financial risk. You're going to throw in there a little bit of human in the loop, right? So that you don't basically let the AI take all of the decisions. Because one thing is true. AI is going to help us with a lot of those decision taking. Is going to suggest a lot of those decisions for us. But it's still the ones that are going to be responsible for those decisions is us, right, at the end. And so it is very important to have that kind of accountability within internal teams and the companies themselves, so that they can have a good strategy, a good implementation, and that they choose a solution that, as Ronen was saying, you can have not only your ERP data, you can have your EDI, your MES, everything connected, APIs, etc., so that you can be more self-sufficient as a company, and that you have warnings, promptings, etc., whatever you need to in order to perform so much better than what we do as of now.
Got it. Okay. Awesome. Well, wow, we're getting some questions here. So let me move us along so we can get to your questions. I think the last piece we wanted to leave here was really just the conversation that Isidro and I were having around what to look for in an integration platform. I think the connectivity piece we talked about, integrating across your entire stack. For context, obviously having the right guardrails in place and making sure that human in the loop capabilities are still in place. Again, having that control on the IT side, having the flexibility and the extensibility on the business side. The unification piece is going to be key as you start to look across deterministic to non-deterministic flows and where you can leverage the platform. And then, the extensibility of making sure that it's future ready. So those are some of the pieces that I think, Isidro, if I were to just kind of recap like our conversation around that, anything else you would add to this before we move on?
Yeah, definitely. Connectivity, it's a starting point. If you're looking for an integration platform that is going to help you with all things AI, look for this specific for pilers, basically, because otherwise you're going to spend a lot of money on trying to implement different tools. I've seen people trying to implement one tool for their ERP system, another one for coding, another one for MES, because one thing is true, not every LLM is going to behave the same and is not going to give you the same results. They are made for different reasons. You have some of those LLMs that are going to give you reasoning, for example, results with reasoning. Some others are going to be very plain and they're going to give you coding, better coding, which is perfect. But you need to prepare in order to have that conversation within the company and say, all right, what are the things that we want to achieve, and start by the connectivity. Otherwise, you're going to be stalled. Your projects are going to lose momentum. They're going to be lost in the time, and no one is going to take them over.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. No, that makes a ton of sense. So let's switch gears, guys. This has been great. Thank you for indulging me and to kind of having this conversation. It's top of mind, I think, in the world that we live in, and I think it's great. We've got some great questions here. One that came in, I think from I think it's for you, Isidro, from Gabriel. What are your insights on what clients need to start or prepare to adopt AI into their day-to-day operations? Like, what do you suggest they begin doing right now to embrace it?
Perfect. Yeah. So one of the things that I will suggest is to start by identifying what are the things that you can optimize by the use of AI. For example, look for business processes that you might improve. Look for any things that you might have not only hard or soft savings, but something on the time. Can you improve the efficiency on certain tasks, certain operations? Once you define all of that, all of those operations or all of those business processes, then the next step will be, all right, what are the tools that we need in order to start achieving this? Do we need separate tools? That's going to be very costly. Do we want to go ahead and choose an iPaaS as Celigo? That'll be better if you have several data sources and you want to integrate each of those. So I would say start by doing discovery. And once you have that discovery, then start taking little steps towards your decision in order to implement AI.
Got it. Great. Thank you, Gabriel, for that question. We have another question. Maybe Ronen, if just to spread the love, maybe have you take this one. When you're advising clients or customers on their AI strategy, what's the most common area often overlooked when measuring success?
When measuring success, well, it's actually the measurement of success, right? So a lot of organizations actually implement a bunch of these initiatives without having a very clear definition of what success looks like. And I think that's absolutely where you need to start. I'll say one other thing in this context. I'm a big fan of setting the parameters for success in a way that aligns kind of with business objectives. You see some organizations do things like measuring amount of time saved or similar proxy values. And those aren't really great because they don't show you whether you're actually having an impact on the business, because you don't know how that time saved is actually used, right? So being very, first of all, specific about what it is that you're trying to do and what the outcomes you're expecting to get are, and how do they translate into impact on the business rather than proxy metrics. I think that's kind of a key in kind of being able to tell that you're on track. Most companies these days are not there. They're not doing that kind of work, and you're seeing a lot of experimentation, and that's why you're not able to see kind of actually measurable ROI being reported by most organizations.
Yep. Isidro, anything to add to that, or you good?
I agree 100% with Ronen, and
Right.
that goes back to that kind of a strategy and discovery that you need to have on your company, right? So that you can start enabling AI for the whole business.
Got it. Okay, perfect. Question for either of you, and this is an interesting one. And we talked about governance, we talked about security and control. When you talk about governance layer, what's the best way to implement that? And maybe talk a little bit about sort of how you counsel, clients, both in terms of leveraging Celigo and how they should be thinking about that governance layer. Up to whoever wants to maybe take this one.
I'll let Ronen go first.
Yeah, maybe I'll start. So this is obviously an issue for each company to kind of figure out on its own, but governance is critical here. There are certain common things that every company should care about. For example, do you have a policy for what information is permitted to go into the AI and what isn't? Is PII, for example, allowed to go in? Do you have proper access permissions established across all these data sources, right? Think about kind of the flip side of the problem we were talking about today, is that if you connect all the data sources together, theoretically, everybody has access, unless you've implemented proper access controls. That is going to be critical. And then, of course, being very conscious of security and your level of risk and what could go wrong, right? So this obviously differs greatly between organizations. For example, at Celigo right now, when we implement AI, we do not let AI communicate directly with the customers. We have a human in the loop when that happens. But for things that are more basic, I mentioned previously kind of expense reports, right? We let the AI kind of function on its own. So all of these things are choices that each organization needs to kind of think about for themselves. And the important thing about this is that the line might change over time, right? So things that you're uncomfortable with today, you might be comfortable in the future, and vice versa. So my advice is always kind of go at the start slow and kind of ramp up over time.
Anything to add to that, Isidro?
Yeah, I'll say that you need to make sure that when you talk about the governance, you need to choose a platform that allows you to ensure data integrity, traceability, role-based control, exception management, right? And one very important thing, model transparency, because sometimes you have models out there that do not play well when you have PII data. And sometimes they don't even tell if they are going to use that information for their own purpose, like their own training and stuff. So make sure that whenever you're choosing a platform and AI model, you have at least those things on governance area. Ensure that you have auditability as well, because that is the only way that you're going to be able to not only to use AI to the extent, but also to make it secure for your employees and for yourself. So yeah, basically, data governance is a thing that doesn't need to be overlooked.
Okay, yeah, awesome. This is great. I think we have one more. I'm going to maybe just take one more, and then we'll close it out and let folks enjoy the rest of the afternoon here. But in terms of sort of the elephant in the room, right? So we talk a lot about efficiencies. We talk a lot about AI-driven efficiencies. and what that could mean to the workforce. And I think the conversation needs to shift around, like, how do you amplify certain roles that don't exist today versus like eliminating certain roles. It's creating like new opportunities for how you think about AI in the realm of, becoming an AI company. And I'm curious if you guys have a point of view on maybe some emerging roles that you're starting to see, come into fray, just given the fact that you've got just different mindsets now and different ways of kind of taking AI across both internally as well as externally across the business. Are you seeing new roles kind of emerge around that? And how are you seeing companies kind of navigate that?
I've seen, for example, April, different new roles. Some of those prompt engineers, right? The so-called prompt engineers, which is the thing, right? Because you need to know how to ask the models, and not every one of us knows how to do that, right? I've seen people saying, "Hey, please give me, thank you," right? Thank you, model LLM. That doesn't work at all, right? Because that's not how they work. The LLMs work. But I've seen these kind of roles that are more technical. Yes, it is true that as soon as you start implementing AI to automate some workflows, some tasks, there's going to be some more efficiencies on different roles. There's going to be a decrease of operations, maybe manual operations, but it's going to give you also the possibility to learn something new, go into the technical side as well, and start on the AI realm. I've seen, for example, other roles when it comes to developers, for example. Maybe you don't need a full stack developer as of now at all, maybe not the 80% of it, because you can do it with AI. However, if you throw in there the human in the loop, you're going to see roles more for QA of coding, for example, right? Rather than coding, throw in there some people that can test it truthfully, so that you can ensure that whatever you do is going to be 100% secure, and it's going to be able to be used at the company.
Okay, got it. Yeah, makes sense. Anything to add, Ronen, before we wrap up?
Yeah, I mean, look, the reality is that every role in the business world is going to be changing over the next few years. I don't think there's getting around that. I think there's two interesting things that are happening that are worth kind of keeping an eye on. One is an explosion of entrepreneurship. The ability to start a business using AI has become dramatically more accessible and easier. I'm seeing folks that were completely non-technical starting to do things that were unimaginable just a few months ago. The second thing I'll say is that this entire conversation has been about how do we do the things that we've been doing better. But there's an entire class of problem that AI enables that we haven't been doing at all, right? So there's all these business things that I've always wanted to accomplish, and they were always on the back burner because they were going to be too long, too expensive, and so on and so forth. And you're going to see a lot of that capability coming to the forefront. So, the way I heard somebody describe this is AI is an exoskeleton for our knowledge workers. They can do tremendously more. And, just looking at Celigo as an example, we have way more things that we want to do than we have capacity, right? So folks that know how to leverage AI effectively are going to be dramatically more productive. And I think that's going to be to everybody's benefit, but time will tell.
Yep. Time will definitely tell. Awesome. Well, that wraps up our session for today. I want to personally thank Ronen, Isidro. Thank you so much for taking time. It's been a great conversation. Really enjoyed it. For those of you, thank you for participating both in the poll and in the questions. We got a lot of questions here that we tried to get through. So appreciate the interactivity, If you're interested to learn more, just a quick, recap here, please reach out to us. We're happy to have conversations around how you're navigating AI and where you are in your maturity curve. We're happy to do an assessment with you and walk you through sort of best practices on both sides. With that, this concludes our session. So thank you all and have a great week. Take care.